Hello and welcome to As the World Burns. This is going to be the first episode of our Halloween episodes. The entire episode is going to be about witches. And the first thing that we're going to talk about today is the witching hour. As we approach it, we talk about it. In folklore, the witching hour or the devil's hour is a time of night that is associated with supernatural events whereby witches, demons, and ghosts are thought to appear and be at their most powerful. Definitions vary and include the hour immediately after midnight and the time between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. I would say that's what the witching hour is 3 a.m. to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah. The term now is a widespread colloquial idiomatic usage that is associated with human physiology and behavior to more superstitious phenomena such as luck. The phrase the witching hour began at least as early as 1762 when it appeared in Elizabeth Carolina Keene's miscellaneous poems. It alludes to Hamlet's line, "'Tis now the very time of night when churchyards yawn and hell itself breaks out the contagion to this world." Yeah. So they also say that like this time of night is when you're at your most like lucid in like if you're like awake and you're like trying to fall asleep. And they also say that like during like your sleep cycle, this is when you're in your REM sleep, which is like a lot of like your dreams and like all kinds of shit like that. So that's fascinating. But I've always been interested in the witching hour because it's, it always has a vibe. Every time, if you go outside or even if you're inside and it's 3 a.m., it's just like there's a vibe about it, about everything. It's pretty spooky. Pretty cool
It's
though.
like a floating set of eyes just opens up behind you.
Everybody knows about the famous witch trials and stuff like that, the Salem witch trials. They were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693, and more than 200 people were accused and 30 people were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed by hanging, 14 women and 5 men. One other man, Giles Corey, died under torture after refusing to enter a plea, and at least 5 people died in the disease-ridden jails without a trial. That's fucked up. I mean, it's all fucked up, but, it's fucking crazy. The accusations began in Salem Village, known today as Danvers. Accusations and arrests were made in numerous towns beyond the village, notably in Andover and Topsfield, and the residency of many of the accused is now unknown. And around 151 people, nearly half that were accused, were able to be traced back to 25 different New England communities. The grand juries and trials for this capital crime were conducted by a court of oyer and terminer in 1692 and by a superior court of judicature in 1693, both held in the Salem town, regional center for Salem Village, where the hangings also took place. It was the deadliest witch hunt in the history of colonial North America. 14 other women and 2 men were executed in Massachusetts and Connecticut during the 17th century. The Salem witch trials only came to an end when serious doubts began to arise among leading clergymen about the validity of the spectral evidence that had been used to justify so many of the convictions. In the years after the trials, several of the accusers, mostly teenage girls, admitted they had fabricated their charges. What a bunch of assholes. In 1702, the General Court of Massachusetts declared the trials unlawful, and in 1711, the colonial legislature annulled convictions, passing a bill mentioning 22 individuals by name and reversing their attainders. The episode is one of colonial America's most notorious cases of mass hysteria. I would argue it's also one of the darkest periods of colonial America.
I agree.
It's pretty fucked up. It was not unique, but a colonial manifestation of the much broader phenomenon of witch trials in the early modern period, which took the lives of tens of thousands in Europe and in America. Salem's events have been used in political rhetoric and popular literature as vivid cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation, religious extremism, and false accusations, and lapses in due process. Many historians consider the lasting effects of the trials to have been highly influential in the history of the United States. I would argue that. According to historian George Lincoln Burr, the Salem witchcraft was the rock on which New England theocracy shattered. At the 300th anniversary events held in 1992 to commemorate the victims of the trials, a park was dedicated in Salem and a memorial in Danvers. That's cool. While witch trials had begun to fade out across much of Europe by the mid-17th century, they continued on the fringes of Europe and in the American colonies. The events in 1692 to 93 in Salem became a brief outburst of a sort of hysteria in the New World, while the practice was already waning in most of Europe. In 1668, and against modern seducism, Joseph Glanville claimed that he could prove the existence of witches and ghosts of the supernatural realm. Glanville wrote about the denial of the bodily resurrection and the supernatural spirits. In his treatise, Glanville claimed that ingenious men should believe in witches and apparitions. If they doubted the reality of spirits, they not only denied demons, but also the Almighty God. Glanville wanted to prove that the supernatural could not be denied. Those who did deny apparitions were considered heretics, for it also disproved their beliefs in angels. Works by men such as Glanville and Cotton Mather tried to prove the demons were alive. The earliest recorded witchcraft execution was that of Alcee Young in 1647 in Hartford, Connecticut. The start of the Connecticut witch trials, which lasted until 1663. And about the Connecticut witch trials, sometimes referred to as the Hartford witch trials, they occurred from 1647 to 63, and they were the first large-scale witch trials in American colonies, predating the Salem witch trials by nearly 30 years. John M. Taylor lists a total of 37 cases, 11 of which resulted in executions. And the execution of Alcee Young of Windsor in the spring of 1647 was the beginning of the witch panic in the area, which would not come to an end until 1670 with the release of Catherine Harrison. And the history of witchcraft in Connecticut is difficult to track, owing primarily to the lack of documentation from the accusations, trials, and executions. Despite this, there is enough existing evidence to gain an insight into the culture of witchcraft trials. In the early days of the trials, Reverend Samuel Stone of Hartford, Joseph Haynes of Wethersfield, and Samuel Hooker of Farmington served on a prosecutorial tribunal, which contradicted the traditional idea that the prosecutors should remain skeptical and immune to public pressure to convict. Thomas Wells was the magistrate during the trials. As was the popular belief at the time, magistrates of Connecticut relied on evidence of the devil's involvement in inflicting harm to secure a conviction of witchcraft, but such evidence could easily be found through battering interrogations. Oof. That's fucked up. Alcee Young was the first person executed for witchcraft, not only in Connecticut, but likely in the whole of the American colonies. On May 26, 1647, she was executed in Hartford. Her execution was reported in the journals of John Winthrop, the governor of Massachusetts Bay, and Matthew Grant, the second town clerk of Windsor. There are no further surviving records on Young's trial or specification of the charges against her. Around the time of the trial, an influenza epidemic occurred throughout New England area, including her hometown of Windsor, which may have influenced the accusations against her. Imagine that everybody's just like getting like fever and flus and like hallucinating, and they're like, oh, that that Alcee, I saw her like shoot magic from her fingertips while I was sick and shit. She made me sick.
What if she did?
I mean, she could have made them sick. She could have brought the flu to the area. Here's the issue with people killing or executing witches. And I mean, there's an insane number of issues with that. But like, here's a really big issue is that there's no number of like good or bad witches. There's just like witches, right? So like some people practice like darker magic. Some people practice like lighter magic. So like all of these people killing all of these witches, they were killing them incessantly. It didn't matter if they were practicing darker, evil, lighter, and more naturalistic.
Yeah.
I feel like they were going crazy with it, and that what that does is that stunts a society, because when all of these people that have this esoteric knowledge and have all of this spiritual like resonance, so to speak, get cut off at that point and get snuffed out, that's insane. That's not a good thing, obviously.
It's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. But it's crazy to me because like America could have been such a spiritual and witchy place, even more so than it already is. All it took was just a little more open-mindedness from these stupid, Puritans. if it was in fact like witchcraft that they were going after, and it wasn't just people like gossiping and making shit up.
You know what'd be funny is if like it was like the I think somebody tried to tell me that like the Kardashians go back to the witch trials.
No, that's not true. They're I mean, I don't think on either side they would go back to the witch trials.
I have no idea. I was just thinking how funny it would be if like one of the people that actually like would go on to start the family of Satan worshipping cabal that runs the world, like they actually just got away with it, conniving the whole time.
Well, I feel like that probably did happen. I feel like there's some people that are like that. Mary Johnson. Mary Johnson was the first recorded confession of witchcraft.
What?
She worked as a house servant and was accused of theft in 1648. After extensive torture and interrogation, Johnson confessed to familiarity with the devil. That's a quote.
What?
She also confessed to having sexual relations with men and devils and to murdering a child.
Well, that's
What?
not good.
Well, that's not good. Her execution was delayed as she was pregnant during her imprisonment in Hartford, and Johnson was executed June 6, 1650. So was that kid going to be like the omen or something? Catherine Harrison was a former maidservant of Captain John Culloch and the widow of Wethersfield town crier. Harrison was born in England and came to America around 1651. She became a wealthy citizen of Wethersfield, Connecticut after she inherited her husband's estate, worth £1,000. Harrison experienced several legal problems, including the death of her livestock and the destruction of crops. Though her losses were supported by eyewitnesses, she received no compensation. In 1668, she was sued for slandering Goody Griswold. What a name. What kind of names are these back then? Goody Griswold?
Hey, my name's Goody. I'm a good guy.
Hey, everybody, I'm Goody Griswold. I'm just here to check out your carpentry over here.
I'm here to inspect your daughters for witchcraft.
I'm here to make sure that none of your daughters got any witchcraft. I'm Goody Griswold over here. I'm real good, okay? I'm goody at what I do. That's why they call me Goody Good Griswold. Between 1668 and 1669, Harrison was also accused of witchcraft. So not only was she sued for slandering Goody Griswold, which,
Poor guy.
yeah, poor guy. How can you slander Goody Griswold? He's a, he's good.
He's a saint.
He's a saint, apparently, and she's a witch, I guess, so it works. They sound like the perfect odd couple. Between 1668 and 69, Harrison was also accused of witchcraft. The accusations against her included breaking the Sabbath, fortune telling, and using black magic, as well as appearing in spectral form. Okay, that's cool. I would think that that's cool if I saw that. She was also accused of calling to the devil by the swamp. I mean, that's pretty metal. On May 11th, 1669, she was moved to the local jail to await her trial.
She's your dream girl.
She's your dream girl. No. Harrison's trial faced many complications, and the first jury never reached a decision, and the second found her guilty. But the magistrates disagreed as the most evidence was spectral, which relied solely on the accuser. In May of 1670, Harrison was released from prison and banished from the Connecticut colony. She and her family relocated to New York as they had already planned to do. Wow. By 1663, the witchcraft trials in Hartford were beginning to wind down, due in no small part to the return of the governor of the Connecticut colony, John Winthrop Jr. Winthrop was generally regarded as New England's quintessential adjudicator of witchcraft cases. That's a great, that's a fantastic, title. New England's quintessential adjudicator of witchcraft cases.
I bet he was cool.
He was. He sounds pretty cool. Son of Governor John Winthrop, I think. I'm pretty sure his dad was the original John Winthrop that ran Massachusetts colony. Winthrop was generally regarded as, due not only to his status as the son, I should have just read the next line, the son of Governor of Massachusetts, but also to his firsthand knowledge of natural magical practices. Whoa, this dude sounds really cool. Associated with alchemy, a mystical form of chemical experimentation, because of experience with alchemy and having seen John Dee and Robert Flood, two major influences in Winthrop's studies.
He met John Dee?
I guess so. Having seen John Dee and Robert Flood. Robert Flood, physician and occult interest. He's remembered as astrologer, mathematician, cosmologist, Kabbalist and Rosicrucian, and John D. Much of his time in alchemy, divination, and hermetic philosophy, antiquary. So this John Winthrop Jr. sounds like a really cool dude. You were right. You called it. Winthrop often involved himself in witchcraft cases to ensure that the accused were not executed. His return and involvement in trials ushered in a period of increasing skepticism towards accusations of witchcraft. And in 1669, it was Winthrop's court that established that multiple witnesses needed to bear witness to the same act of witchcraft simultaneously. This significantly stemmed the flow of accusations, and despite a minor panic during the Salem crisis later, no witches were executed in Connecticut after Catherine Harrison's release in 1670. That's cool. I mean, other than the Salem part, but everything else is pretty. That was to give, I guess, context to the Salem witch trials.
So if you don't know what witches are, that's a quick breakdown.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool too.
I think you should actually get more into what witches are and what they do. I think you should describe some I think you should go into some real witch problems. Like, what's a real bad witch?
I was
Like
gonna
the witch from Weapons.
do that after we just do the Salem. Should we not talk about the Salem witch trials?
We just did.
All right. I mean that the Connecticut thing was supposed to lead into it. All right.
Well, it happened. We know it happened.
Yeah, we know it happened. Okay, if anybody has any questions about the Salem witch trial, just look it up.
Sorry if you had no idea and you were excited to learn.
Sorry, no. I mean, I feel like nobody knew about the Connecticut witch trials. I had no idea about that. Like, I didn't know. I mean, I knew that there were other witch trials besides the Salem, but all right. Well, speaking of,
Connecticut is the worst state. Prove me wrong.
they do have terrible drivers, but can we just go over the Valais witch trials? It was one of the first witch trials in modern history.
Sure.
All right. The Valais witch trials, I'll do it quick. It consisted of a witch hunt and a series of witch trials which took place in Valais, the House of Savoy, and the Prince Bishopric of Sion, today part of Switzerland, beginning in 1428. The Valais witch hunt is the first of the systematic campaigns which would become much more widespread in the decades to come, initiating the period of witch trials in Europe. The persecutions started in French-speaking Lower Valais and spread to German-speaking Upper Valais in nearby valleys in the Western Alps. They subsided after 6 to 8 years, but the phenomenon spread further afield from there to Vaud, Fribourg, Neuchâtel, and beyond. Although occasionally burning of witches is recorded in Switzerland since the beginning of the 15th century, the Valais trials of the 1428, the first event in which the accusation of sorcery is systematic persecution with hundreds of victims executed. The main contemporary account of the event is a short report by Johannes Brunn of Lucerne, written in 1430, possibly in the request of Christoph von Selenin, at the time Castellan in Siders. It is an extant in two versions. The Lucerne version is older and a probable autograph. This is the oldest known account of the incipient systematic witch hunts of the 1430s to 1440s. The witch trials emerged before the background of the persecution of the Waldensians in Freiburg, due to which a functioning inquisition with a seat in Lauchâne has been established. Additionally, the Valais was at the time politically fragmented. All right. Anyways, by the summer of 1428, the entire Valais was affected. On the 7th of August, the authorities in Luke issued a formal proclamation of the necessary procedures for a witch trial. According to the document, the public talk or slander of 3 or 4 neighbors was enough for arrest and imprisonment. Even if the accused was a member of nobility, the use of torture was reserved for victims. Slandered by 5, 6, or 7 or more persons, up to the number of 10 who are qualified to do so, and not under suspicions themselves, but also those accused by 3 persons who had been tried and sentenced to death for the practice of sorcery. According to Frun's account, the victims were accused of murder, heresy, and sorcery, being in pact with the devil, and they were supposedly paying tribute for the devil, who appeared as a black animal such as a bear or a ram. The devil asked his follower to avoid holy mass and confession. I guess that's what he says. Frund relates that some of the accused were tortured to death without without issuing a confession, while others did confess a variety of evil deeds, such as causing lameness. Causing lameness is hilarious. Blindness, madness, miscarriage, impotence, infertility, and killing and eating their own children. That's why. He also alludes to the topos of flying witches, saying that they would apply a salve to their chairs and then ride the chairs wherever they wanted. And the witches' Sabbath, saying that the witches would meet in people's cellars at night and drink their wine, and meeting to listen to anti-Christian sermons by the devil in the form of a schoolmaster, with a mock confession of any good deeds they might have done, which would gain much influence in the early modern period. He even reports some of them being werewolves, killing livestock in the shape of a wolf and knowing the recipe of an invisibility. Others confess to ruining crops, wine, and grain, and causing livestock to give no milk and plowing teams to stand still. The trials continued for several years more, well into the 1430s. The number of victims is unknown, but ranges in the hundreds. Brunn speaks of a conspiracy of 700 witches, of which more than 200 had been burned 2 years into the trials. Contrary to the later phase of the European witch trials, when the majority of those accused were women, the victims in the Belays witch trials are estimated to have been 2/3 male and 1/3 female. That's interesting. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting little bit. All right. So, the Witches' Sabbath, a purported gathering of those believed to practice witchcraft and other rituals. The phrase became especially popular in the 20th century. The most infamous and influential work of witch hunting lore, Malleus Maleficarum, does not contain the word Sabbath. Interesting. The first recorded English use of Sabbath referring to sorcery was in 1660, Francis Brooks' translation of Vincent LeBlanc's book, The World Surveyed. Divers and sorcerers have confessed that in their Sabbaths they feed on such fare. The phrase Witches' Sabbath appeared in a 1613 translation by W.B. of Sebastian Michelaus, Admirable History of Possession and Conversion of a Penitent Woman. He also said, Magdalene, art not thou an accursed woman that the witches' Sabbath is kept here? The phrase is used by Henry Charles Lea in his History of the Inquisition of the Middle Ages, writing in 1900. German historian Joseph Hansen, who was a correspondent and a German translator of Lea's work, frequently uses the shorthand phrase Hexen Sabbath to interpret medieval trial records. Where does it say talk about what they do, though? That's what I want to know. About 150 years later, near the peak of the witch phobia of the persecutions, which led to the execution of an estimated 40,000 to 100,000 persons, with roughly 80% being women, the Francophone writers still seem to be the main ones using related terms. Although still infrequently and sporadically in most cases, Lambert now uses Sabbath the one time. They keep talking about the etymology. I want to know about the Sabbath. Modern researchers have been unable to find any corroboration with the notation that physical gatherings of practitioners of witchcraft occurred. I mean, of course they occurred. Come on. In his study, The Pursuit of Witches and the Sexual Discourse of the Sabbath, that's a crazy name, the historian Scott E. Hendricks presents a twofold explanation for why these stories were so commonly told in spite of the fact that Sabbaths likely never occurred. First belief is the real power of witchcraft grew during the late medieval and early modern Europe. As a doctrinal view in opposition to the canon episcopi gained ground in certain communities, this fueled a paranoia among certain religious authorities that there was a vast underground conspiracy of witches determined to overthrow Christianity with ritual elements.
Where are the real witches?
Well, I'm trying to get into the witch shit.
Because if we're gonna talk about witches, I want to respect the actual cool, powerful witches, like Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks.
Yeah.
Vanessa Hudgens apparently practices witchcraft, so that's cool. All right. So, famous witches throughout history and their lasting legacies. There's something endlessly captivating about witches, whether cloaked in shadows or cloaked in wisdom. Witches have woven their stories into the tapestry of history, some feared, some revered, and all unforgettable. They haunt folklore and chant pop culture, provoke curiosity across generations. But beyond the broomsticks and cauldrons, behind the smoke and mirrors lie real people, healers, rebels, mystics, and those legacies still echo today. From the hushed whispers of village healers to the firelit trials that scorched the name witch into the cultural consciousness, the stories of these individuals often began in hardship and ended in tragedy, and yet they endured. Their power, real or imagined, threatened the systems around them, but their voices, once silenced, now speak louder than ever. In their stories, we find not only magic but meaning, symbols of feminine power, spiritual insight, and resistance to oppression. Here at Nevermore Lane, this is the publication read. We're always on the lookout for mysteries, myths that shape our magical lives. In this post, I'm summoning the spirits of some of the most famous witches from across time. Their stories are more than just tales, they're torches passed from hand to hand, illuminating our path. So grab your brew of choice, settle in, and let's conjure a little history together. First, what makes a witch? Before we delve into the lives of specific witches, it's important to ask, what defines a witch? The answer isn't always straightforward. In many cultures, a witch is someone with knowledge of herbs, healing, midwifery, or divination. In others, it's a feared figure who wields supernatural powers or challenges religious and social norms. Often those branded as witches were simply women who stepped outside their expected roles. The label of witch has been both a weapon and wonder. It was used to condemn and control, but also embraced by those who sought deeper truths or rebelled against societal expectation. The accusation of witchcraft were often rooted in fear of the unknown, of female autonomy, of spiritual independence, but where some saw danger, others saw divine. In today's magical lifestyle, many proudly reclaim the word witch as a symbol of empowerment and spiritual awakening. Examining the figures throughout history who bore the name by force or by choice gives us insight not only into the past, but also into ourselves. Now let's meet some of the most iconic witches whose lives and legends have shaped our understanding of magic today.
You know what we should do?
What?
We should have you do a ritual that like summons another part of yourself, like your shadow or something like that, and we should have an interview with your shadow.
Interview with the shadow.
Would that be
I'm
cool?
down for it.
Give it a shot right now.
No, I was gonna say that's something for another day. We're doing witchcraft right now. We still got to figure out what exactly witchcraft even is. All right, so here is the list of women that were accused of witchcraft in days of old. Tituba, the enslaved woman who sparked Salem's fire. When we think of the Salem witch trials, we often picture Puritan girls, dark forests, and deadly superstitions. But the very center of the hysteria was a woman named Tituba, a slave of African or Caribbean descent owned by Reverend Samuel Parris. In 1692, she was accused of teaching witchcraft to young girls in Salem village. Tituba's confession, which blended elements of her own cultural practices with the expectations of her interrogators, ignited a wildfire of accusations. Some historians argue that she may have intentionally shaped her confession to reflect what the judges wanted to hear, while also subtly subverting their narrative. Regardless, she was among the first to be accused, and her testimony contributed to the ensuing chaos. Tituba's story is often overshadowed by the more infamous witches of Salem, but her legacy is profound. She represents the complex intersections of race, power, and spiritual identity. For today's magical practitioners, Tituba's tale serves as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of ancestral resilience and survival through story and spirit. That was a good one. I've heard her story before, but we didn't get into it because we didn't finish Salem. Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans. No list of legendary witches would be complete without Marie Laveau. I've heard of this lady too. The famous voodoo queen of the 19th century New Orleans, a Creole woman of mixed African, Native American, and European heritage. Laveau became a powerful spiritual leader, healer, and oracle within her community. Her influence stretched across races and classes in a deeply divided society. Marie Laveau practiced Louisiana voodoo, a unique blend of African spiritual traditions, Catholicism, and indigenous practices. She was renowned for her rituals in Congo Square, her healing practices, and her significant political influences. Stories of her powers range from miraculous to the mysterious, curing illnesses, foreseeing deaths, or making the impossible happen. Her tomb in the St. Louis Cemetery #1 continues to attract visitors who mark it with X's and leave offerings in the hopes of gaining her favor. Today, Marie Laveau stands as a testament to spiritual syncretism, feminine power, and the enduring strength of Black spirituality in the face of oppression. She is both a historical figure and a spiritual force revered by many contemporary magical practitioners. Mole Dyer, the ghost witch of Maryland. In the misty legends of colonial Maryland, the name Mole Dyer still whispers through the woods. Said to have lived in Leonardtown during the 1600s, Mole was an outcast who lived on the edges of society. Accused of witchcraft during a harsh winter, local townspeople reportedly drove her from her home. She fled into the forest and was later found frozen to a large stone, hand pressed into its surface. Her curse, they claim, forever etched into the land. Unlike other witches who gained fame through trial records, Mole Dyer's story is rooted in folklore. Her legend has been passed down through generations, growing with each reason. The stone where she died is now preserved in front of the old jailhouse museum, and visitors claim to still feel the chill in the air or see her ghost wandering in the woods. Moldyre's tale is a chilling reminder of what happens when fear overrides compassion. It's also a story of spirit, literally and metaphorically. For many modern witches, she symbolizes the power of the outsider and the importance of honoring those who are wrong. Her story continues to haunt not just the land, but the conscience of those who seek justice in the craft. That's pretty well said. This next one is Isabel Godey, the Scottish witch who sang her spells. In the dark days of Scotland's witch hunts, one woman's confession stood out from the rest. Isabel Godey, tried in 1662 in the Highlands, gave a series of rich, poetic, and strangely detailed testimonies about her life as a witch. Oh, this sounds like it would be really interesting to read her shit. She spoke of flying through the night, shape-shifting into animals, feasting with the Queen of Elfham, Fairy Queen, and casting spells with rhyme and rhythm. Isabel's confessions were likely extracted under duress, but they are unique in their vividness and lyrical beauty. She describes spells in enchanting detail, so much so that folklorists and modern witches still study her words today. One of her spells to transform into a hare reads like a chant. I shall go into a hare with sorrow and sight and meekly care. Though she vanished from the historical record after a trial, Isabel's voice has become immortal. In her story, we see the mingling of folk tradition, fairy lore, and feminine power. For those who work with a poetic magic or nature-based paths, Isabel is a muse, a reminder that magic is not just practice but poetry. La Voisin, the poisoner priestess of Paris. Catherine Monvoisin, known to history as La Voisin, was a fortune teller, midwife, and accused witch who operated in 17th century Paris. Her services weren't just candles and card readings. La Voisin allegedly offered poisons, love charms, and even black masses to her wealthy client. She was a central figure in the affair of poisons, a massive scandal that rocked the court of King Louis XIV. La Voisin's story is both glamorously dark and starkly political. Many of her clients were nobles and aristocrats, including the king's mistress. Her underground network provided secret solutions to women trapped in arranged marriages or for those seeking to rise in power. But her services eventually caught the attention of authorities, and she was arrested, tortured, and burned at the stake in 1680. Though she was demonized in her time, La Voisin represents a complex kind of witch, one who used her knowledge and power to manipulate the very structures that oppressed women. Yeah, I was going to say, I like this one so far. I like her. She's a cautionary tale and a symbol of subversive female agency, a dark mirror to the pristine image of the 17th century femininity. Today, she stands as a reminder that magic has always walked hand in hand with survival and strategy. That's cool. Baba Yaga, the crone who commands the forest. Not all witches are flesh and blood. Some dwell in the realm of myth and continue to influence magic from the depths of the story. Baba Yaga, the enigmatic Slavic witch, is one such figure. She lives in a hut that walks on chicken legs, flies in a mortar and pestle, and guards the boundary between the known and the mysterious. Baba Yaga is neither good nor evil. She is liminal, powerful, and often terrifying. She tests those who come to her with impossible tasks, offering rewards and cleverness and punishment for arrogance. Yet she is also a guardian of wisdom, holding the keys to transformation for those brave enough to seek her help. Unlike the sanitized fairy godmothers of Western tales, Baba Yaga represents a raw, untamed feminine force. In modern witchcraft, Baba Yaga has become a symbol of the crone archetype, the wise woman who dwells beyond the boundaries of society. She challenges us to face our fears, honor the cycles of life and death, and find power in the age of mystery and shadow. Whether invoked in ritual or studied through folklore, she continues to shape the soul of the craft. All right.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was cool. Let's look up rituals.
Rituals to do, for real.
Spells and rituals. We got to look for an old grimoire.
I can get one of those for us.
Like an old one?
Yeah.
Like you have it on hand?
No.
Oh, I mean, I can get one too, but I get you. All right, grimoires and occult revival. Grimoires are spell books that contain symbols, incantation, charms, and instructions for invocations and the making of amulets. Although these texts have existed since ancient times, they became much more readily available after the advent of printing. Most grimoires were published in the Protestant or other non-Catholic states, since, like witchcraft, the Inquisition has considered these texts heretical. Many landed on the pages of the Catholic Church. Catholic Church's Index Librorum Prohibitorum. Let me see if I have any books about it. I have a guide to shadow work. That would be like it, right? All right. So some people are saying for herbal cures, try the Physicians and Midfi, giving details of the cures used by a family of physicians in Wales, many of which were first recorded in the 14th century in the Red Book of Kyrgyz. Translations into English are readily available on Amazon. I do have this, the complete book of incense oils and brews. That might be different. And I also have this book, The Morning of the Magician.
We need to find a witch to be on this podcast.
Yeah, that would be cool.
If you're a witch and you're listening to this, please reach out.
That'd be cool. Did you know the Wild Hunt was a real thing?
I have no idea about the Wild Hunt.
Spectral nocturnal procession of huntsmen, ghosts of the dead, horses.
I know about the Wild Hunt being based on mythology, but
Oh, they do have flying ointment. Hey, do you know what the opposite of a witch is? I didn't know that there was actually like a thing.
a warlock?
No, that's just like a kind of, but not
A
really.
male witch?
So there's something called cunning folk, also known as folk healers or wise folk, where practitioners of folk medicine, helpful folk magic, and divination in Europe from the Middle Ages until the 20th century.
I've heard of cunning folk before.
Apparently, they're
Heard of that.
anti-witches. They seem like
Why? What makes them anti-witches, not just another kind of witch?
their practices were known as cunning craft. Their services also including thwarting witchcraft, although some cunning folk were denounced as witches themselves. They made up a minority of those accused, and the common people generally made a distinction between the two. The name cunning folk originally referred to folk healers and magic workers in Britain, but the name is now applied as an umbrella term for similar people in other parts of Europe. Interesting. And these people were all over. In Scandinavia, they were the wise woman or wise man, the wise ones, and they were known in Swedish. They were usually elder members of the community who acted as folk healers and midwives, as well as using folk magic such as magic rhyme. In Denmark, they were called Klogmans, wise man, and Klogkone, wise woman, and collectively as the Klogfolk, the wise folk.
The clog folk?
The Clog folk. Many Norwegian and Danish practitioners of folk magic and medicine would have a copy of the Svard Book or the Black Book, a tome that, according to some, was written by Cyprianus, that is the saint of necromancers, Cyprian of Antioch, and to others,
The saint of necromancy?
isn't Saint of Necromancers. That's a pretty cool title.
This is cool.
Yeah. and to others to have been sixth and seventh books of the Bible or books of Moses, as the Penta- Pentateuch is known in Denmark and Norway, that were left out of the official Old Testament by the learned so that the common folk would not learn the knowledge held within the text. A formulary found in the Black Book recovered from the farm near Elverum contains many formulas, such as one for toothache, that commands the user of the charm to write the words Azurin, Nazarin, Vazarin, Jazarin, Ipazarin, and Scipia on a piece of paper using a new pen. Cut the paper into 3 small pieces and place the piece onto the tooth in the evening, and in the morning fit the piece into the fire. This should then be repeated with other pieces. Another charm used for helping a woman is having a who is having a difficult labor says to take 2 white lily roots and give them to the mother to eat. White lily is a pretty great plant, so I get that. I like that. There's an old idea that is Clock Gumma, who often fell victim to the witch trials in the 17th century, but this does not appear to be true. However, some wise women and wise men were punished, not for witchcraft, but often under the indictment point of superstition. In the 1670s, the wise man Johann Ericsson of Nutby was sentenced to 7 gauntlet for superstition, and again in the 1680s to 9. Per Ericsson of Dalarna, who read the diseases in wine, was punished both in 1720 and 1726. Britta Bjorn of Gotland said in a court she learned to heal the sick when she spent some time in the underworld, and she was sentenced to prison in terms in both 1722 and 1737. What? Why was she sentenced to prison twice? The punishment of Sweden's cunning folk only seemed to have the opposite effect. Ericsson said that his clients had been coming in greater numbers after rulings against him, and that he would be forced to hide if he was to obey the court and refrain from practice. In the Bjorn case, the vicar complained that people from throughout the country came to seek her help and relied on her as a god after her first sentence. The sentences in reality had the effect of good advertising, and Britta's daughter and granddaughter's daughter were also killed. That's cool. There are many examples of well-known cunning folk who are known far beyond their village boundaries, such as Ingeborg Merholt in the 18th century in Kaisermoor, and Goda Milena in the 19th century. In the 16th century, Brigitta Andersdotter was often hired by Queen Margaret. This is going to be a hard one. Lejonhufvud in Norway. Some women, such as Mor Sather, Anna Branfeld, and Valborg Valand, achieved national fame unusual for women of the time. The customs persisted well into the 20th century until the medical doctor became more accessible to the public. In the 19th century, every neighborhood in Norway had at least one folk healer. Such beliefs in folk medicine, magic, and the use of black books were taken by immigrants to the Americas. However, many beliefs died out in Norwegian American communities around the 1920s, with many not having knowledge of the subject or of the Black Book. Knowledge of these beliefs did last longer in Norway, even if they were not commonly believed in by Norwegians. That was interesting. Britain. The term cunning man or cunning woman was mostly used in England and Wales. From the early modern era onwards, they were also called wizards, wise men, wise women, and conjurers, or in Welsh, Dines or Hisbys, knowing man or knowing woman. In Cornwall, they were sometimes called pellers, which some etymologists suggest originated from the term expellers, referring to the practice of expelling evil spirits. The term white witch was rarely used before the 20th century, as a witch generally referred to an evil person. In the Middle Ages, those who worked magic in Anglo-Saxon England were referred to by several names. Some of the spells and charms had been used in the Anglo-Saxon paganism continued to be used following Christianization. Historian Owen Davies noted although some such pre-Christian magic continued, to label it pagan is to misrepresent the people who use it and the context in which it was used. Some Christian clergy said secular authorities tried to smear the cunning folk by falsely branding them witches and associating them with harmful witchcraft. However, there were no widespread persecution of them, largely because most common people firmly distinguished between the two. The witches were seen as being harmful and cunning folk as helpful. In the 15th and 16th centuries, there had been no attempt to ban the cunning craft, although private lawsuits had been brought against some cunning folk by clients who felt that they had been cheated out of their money. Under the Witchcraft Act of 1541, a person could be executed for using magic or conjuration to harm others, cast a love spell, or to find a treasure. This law was repealed no later than 1547, which Davies believed was due to those in power changing their opinion. They thought that either the death penalty was too harsh or that magic was a moral issue that should be dealt with by the church rather than by the state. For the following few decades, the magical practices of the cunning folk remained legal. In 1563, another law was passed against conjurations, enchantments, and witchcrafts. This law was not as harsh as its predecessor, with the death penalty being reserved for those who believed to have been murdered by someone by magical means. This law had little effect on the cunning folk, as the attention and focus of the court shifted away from the activities of cunning folk and towards the maleficium of supposed witches. It was unusual for a cunning man or woman to be accused of witchcraft. In the county of Essex, for instance, 400 people had been put on trial for witchcraft, but only 4 of those were cunning folk. The Enlightenment saw a change in attitudes, especially amongst the educated elite. The Witchcraft Act of 1735 repealed earlier laws against witchcraft. Unlike those laws, it did not accept the existence of magic or witches. Instead, anyone who claimed to use magic was to be punished as a swindler and to be imprisoned for 1 year. That's surprisingly progressive, for that time. The belief in cunning folk and the use of white magic to be used for healing as protection against black magic was once widespread in Germany. However, during the early modern period, such practices gradually became less accepted by the authorities, partly because the belief in, quote, white magic was viewed by the church authorities to be contrary to biblical teachings, and partly due to the loss of revenues for certain groups such as the barber surgeons and physicians. I love how the surgeons and the physicians lost their work. Everybody's just like getting good luck charms and talismans and shit. So they're like, yeah, we don't need health. We're good.
Yeah, it's because they're not telling these people like, oh, we need to remove your teeth.
Well, exactly.
They might have to.
That's kind of funny. Like, sometimes the witches were great, and other times they could have been causing issues. It is what it is.
My mouth hurts. Well, here, you're supposed to kiss this frog.
Kiss this frog. Well, no.
Twice a day.
No, remember it said write like 10 things on a piece of paper and then chew on the paper twice a day and then spit the paper into a fire.
Yeah.
That was the exact thing.
That'll get you right.
That'll get you right. In Germany, practitioners of folk magic were almost always female. However, by contrast, Hexenmeister, also a term for a warlock or Hexenfinder who hunted witches and neutralized them on behalf of society, was always male. So a warlock does hunt the witches. In Ireland, names for the cunning folk in Irish include Bean Fisa, wise woman, or Bonfida or Fidebean, Cirrus, or Fear Fisa. This is Irish. How is Irish this different from? Is this like Celtic names?
Yeah.
Holy shit!
Probably.
This is hard. This is harder than most other Fidefian, Bafisa. I don't know if I can do the Irish accent. As in other countries, they provided services of magical healing, folk medicine, divination, and finding lost and stolen property. Well, that's cool. They're like metal detectors, too. It was believed they could cure illnesses in both humans and livestock that were caused by fairies or witches. That's actually pretty dope. Their charms included a short rhyme or prayer referencing Jesus, Mary, or the saints. This was paired with a repetitive motion or ritual and an object. They also performed funeral tasks. That sounded to me like hypnosis, but who am I to say? They also performed funeral tasks like preparing a body for a wake and keening over the body. Interesting. Geroid O. Kurulach wrote that the Bean Fisa was also an oracle authority for a community regarding the meaning and significance of experiences they failed to understand. Interesting. Biddy Early was a famous Irish cunning woman. So that was Ireland. In Italy, the name for the cunning folk vary from region to region. At times, they were sometimes called witches, although usually only behind their backs or by those who are skeptical of their powers or believe they deal in black magic. Unlike in other parts of Europe, such as Britain, the cunning profession survived the 20th century and into the early 21st century, allowing the Italian-American sociologist Sabina Magliocco to make a brief study of them in 2009. That's pretty cool. As in the rest of Europe, the primary role of the Italian cunning folk was apparently in healing, both through the use of herbs and through spiritual healing. The former required knowledge about various plants, herbs on the behalf of the cunning person, although the spiritual healing was believed to come from an inner power known as La Forza, La Virtue, and El Signo, as in the power, the virtue, and the sign. Such healing was often in the form of removing maliocho, or evil eye, which had cursed someone. Italian cunning craft was and continued to remain rooted in the country's Roman Catholicism, which is evident from the use of charms and prayers, which often call upon the aid of saints. Such magical practitioners also widely believed that they dealt with spirit beings, both benevolent, who would aid them, and malevolent, whom they would have to combat. The latter included unquiet dead as well as supernatural witches, who were believed to cause harm to people, whilst the former included ancestors, the helpful dead and saints who could help defeat these malevolent entities. The magical tools were also utilized by Italian cunning folk, and whilst these varied between both regions and practitioners, these commonly include fiber ropes or cords to bind, knives or scissors to cut away illness, and mirrors and weapons to reflect or scare away malevolent spirits. In Italy, the folk healing tradition known as segnature is practiced by rural segnatori and segnatrici, who employ ritual gestures, signs, alongside secret prayers to cure illness, remove curses such as maliocho, the evil eye, and influence natural phenomena, drawing on oral transmission within families and community networks, signature, and influence natural phenomena. Drawing on oral transmission within families and community networks, signature exemplifies an enduring vernacular healing system rooted in pre-Christian animism, but syncretized with Catholic symbolism. In 2024 monograph, Italian Witchcraft and Shamanism, the Tradition of Signature, Indigenous and Transcultural Shamanic Traditions in Italy, Dr. Angela Pucca presents extensive ethnographic research demonstrating how these practices constitute a living form of indigenous Italian shamanism, systematized through gestures, verbal formulas, and initiation, and are experiencing renewed visibility through social media and contemporary frameworks. This positions signature as a coherent strand within Italy's cunning folk tradition, bridging folk Catholicism, ancestral healing, and modern esoteric sensibilities. Zagavori, the use of verbal incantations, arose from Slavic pagan prayers and incantations, whether spoken, whispered, or sung. These incantations have been traditionally accompanied by associated rituals. These incantations have been traditionally accompanied by associated rituals, some of which are or were physically demanding and strenuous. One example calls for the Zagavori practitioner to have either a full set of teeth or a knife as a symbolic substitute for teeth that were missing. A knife as a substitute? The tradition survived into the Christian era largely through a process of syncretism and Christianization of the traditional rites, in which images of lore about Jesus were added to the existing traditions. For instance, a healing would now be done in the name of Jesus, citing a story from the Bible. Yeah, the only reason why I didn't really continue that conversation too much is because me and Sarah are on like kind of a weird spot right now. That's why.
What happened?
It's just usual stupid bullshit. Keeps thinking that I'm not like serious or whatever, and all this other stupid shit. And I don't know. I'd have to show you like the what she said in order to like really go over it. But yeah, it's not looking too good. Um, societal.
You said you have a double tomorrow?
Yeah,
Should make sure you know it's already 12.
I know. I was thinking about like seeing maybe like I was saying, maybe we could do like a part one, part two of the witchcraft thing. I'm down to keep going on witchcraft, honestly. I'm gonna be.
There's plenty to talk about with witchcraft.
That's what I was thinking. Societal concern about the practice of witchcraft centered on. I'm gonna finish this page though, at least. Oh, it's almost done, anyways. Societal concern about the practice of witchcraft centered on whether someone was using incantation or rites to cause harm. In one case, a suspected witchcraft investigators found a locked box containing something bounded in a kerchief and 3 paper packets wrapped and tied, containing crushed grasses. People in Russian and Ukrainian societies usually shun those said to be witches, unless they felt they needed to help against supernatural forces. Impotent stomach pains, barrenness, hernias, abscesses, epileptic seizures, and convulsions were all attributed to evil or witchcraft. In Russia, 3/4 of those accused of witchcraft were men. That's interesting too. America,
That is interesting.
yeah, it's always the European countries where the men are accused of witchcraft, like the Eastern Europeans.
Too true. You know? These are dangerous things that we're saying, you know? Like, you're lucky that we're saying these things.
Yeah, who's gonna tell you the truth about witchcraft? Don't go walking through the Appalachian Mountains if you wanna know about witchcraft.
That's dirty magic.
It's dirty magic. Now Appalachian witches.
Funny enough, that's where Diddy went to magical school.
That's where Diddy went to magical school. Yo, that's crazy.
That was his Hogwarts.
Was the Appalachian Mountains. I thought that's where Percy
Yeah.
Jackson went to go to Hogwarts or whatever. It's the Appalachians.
What?
Isn't that in the movie? Doesn't he go to like some mountain, like forest with a bunch of like fucking kids, and that's like their version of Hogwarts?
I mean, there's like I don't know where their camp is. You're talking about the camp?
Yeah, it's the mountain forests. They have the Appalachian shit.
Sure.
I'm just kidding. Anyways, North and South America happen to have their own variants of these witches, which had taken on aspects of African and native culture, while most of Latin America also used curandero or curandera. I thought they were called brujas and brujos. Maybe this is for the cunning folk. The Appalachia had the mountain witches, possibly taking their name from an attempt to label similar practices amongst the Amish as witchcraft to persecute German immigrants in Appalachia in the 1700s. The Amish practitioners are generally referred to as a brochure, and the concept is known to them as powwow. Creole also have their own traders, traiteurs. Why would they call themselves like traders or traiteurs? Would that be like trader, like a, I don't know, Traiteurs? That almost sounds like trader. In Louisiana, the term traiteur describes a man or woman who practices what is sometimes called faith healing. A traiteur is a Creole healer or a traditional healer of the French-speaking Huma tribe, whose primary method of the treatment involves using the laying on of hands. Okay. So they're like old chiropractors. Among the Gullah-Geechee of the Carolinas is a folk healing tradition within the Hoodoo religion known as root work. That is a combination of African, native, and European beliefs. Such folk healers are known as the conjure doctors or root doctors. Archaeological discoveries also show folk magic being practiced amongst the English colonists, with archaeological discoveries of magical talismans such as witch bottles. What's a witch bottle? A witch bottle is an apotropaic magical item used as protection against witchcraft. They are described in historical sources from England and the United States. The earliest surviving mention is from the 7th century England. So what does this do? Does this like suck up the witch? Or is this like when you throw water on the witch when you're Dorothy and then she starts melting? Do you collect the water and then put it in this bottle?
You don't get it, dude. You'll know when the time comes.
Oh, you just open it and you see what happens?
You'll know when the time comes.
That's it? You'll know
Yeah,
when the time comes. You'll know.
yeah.
Okay.
Is that hard for you to grasp?
Is that hard for you to grasp? No, it's like SpongeBob with the in the SpongeBob movie when he's got the bag of winds and I
Yeah,
think she
exactly.
tells him the exact same thing. You'll know when the time comes. So I will know when the time comes what to do with what.
Speaking of Percy Jackson,
Speaking of why, what's because Neptune's in there?
I think there's a bag of wind in that.
Is there a bag of wind in Percy Jackson?
I'm pretty sure. Maybe in the books.
Oh shit, that's wild. There's a connection right there. So maybe
A little synchronicity.
that is well, maybe the connection too is like the gods, like Neptune and shit, like because it's about Percy Jackson, isn't he like the son of Poseidon?
Yes.
So isn't like King Neptune basically kind of like a almost an analog of Poseidon?
Poseidon? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's probably
Roman Poseidon.
yeah, there's probably some kind of like wind mythology there with Poseidon or something like, you know what I mean? He controls the waves, so he probably controls some like oceany wave thing, like the wind. I don't know. But you'll know when the time comes, right? The tradition appearing to have continued up to at least the Civil War with witch bottles. All of the above traditional forms of folk magic practitioners continued within their respective communities into the 20th century, with many practices still alive and well to this day. Well, that's beautiful.